Hey, how's it going? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing my August wrap-up. In the month of August, I read a total of 11 books, which amounted to this many pages. Sorry, I forgot to count beforehand. I had 4 5-star books this month. One of them was a reread though, and then I had 2 4-star books, 2 3-star books, and 3 2-star books. So it was a mixed bag this month. I read 4 thrillers, 1 poetry collection, 2 sci-fi kind of fantasy books, and then 3 contemporary novels and 1 romance. And then for male versus female authors, I read 8 female authors this month and 3 male authors. As far as checking in on my goals for this month goes, I did complete my book of the month goal this month. I actually read 2 of my book of the month selections from this month, and my rereading goal I did complete this month. So I am 2 for 2. What's up? You want to know a fun fact about this video is that I'm filming this at midnight, and I'm not usually a big filmer of filming at night, but I just got home from working a double all day today, and I work tomorrow, so I don't really have time, and I'm using the tiny little amount of energy that I have left in me to make this video. So the first book that I read this month was The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware, and this was actually one of my book of the month selections for the month of August. This is Ruth Ware's latest new adult thriller. This book was so freaking good, dude. I think this is my favorite book that I read in the month of August. It is an adult thriller, but it also feels very like horror vibes to me, and kind of like paranormal too. It follows this girl who takes up this nannying job, and she gets a nannying job for a very rich family that has this like really smart house, and the house is kind of like haunted though. Like it feels kind of haunted, and the kids that she nannies are very like demonic, crazy children, and it's just so fascinating because like the family has to leave like right away, like the parents, and so they leave her with the kids like almost immediately when she begins her job, and so it's like very scary for her to be left alone in this kind of weird smart house. The house like controls itself, like the lights will like go on by itself, and like music will like turn on by itself. Like it's very creepy, you know? This book, oh my gosh, I stayed up so late finishing this book, and I was home alone when I was reading this, and I was genuinely so scared, like so creeped out. Like this book did an amazing job, and I honestly feel like this would be the perfect Halloween time of year read. Oh my gosh, dude, this is by far the best book that I've read from Ruth Ware this far, and it's just so good. Like this might be my favorite thriller of the year so far. Like it's tied probably with The Silent Patient and Lock Every Door. Like I just really loved it, but this definitely gave me Lock Every Door vibes of like the creepy haunted house kind of thing, you know? But this is a 5-star book for me. I loved it. It was probably my favorite book this month. Oh, so good. The second book I read this month is The Bookish Life of Nina Hill by Abby Waxman, and I actually received this copy as an ARC from Berkeley, but this book actually came out in July, and I ended up listening to the audiobook for this. I was able to check out the audiobook from my library. This book is so cute. This one is a contemporary light romance story. It follows this girl, Nina Hill, who is one of the most relatable characters of all time for me now. She's basically like an adult version of Kath from Fangirl. This story is basically about how this girl, Nina Hill, is like the biggest bookworm nerd. She doesn't really talk to anybody, and she just like lives in her own world, and then she finds out that her dad died, like her birth father, who she never knew, died, and he left behind this will for her, and she has a bunch of cousins and relatives living close to her, and so it's about her like coming of age story kind of. She starts to explore some romance, and she also meets a bunch of relatives that she didn't know that she had, and it's like a really beautiful coming of age story about her getting close to her family, and you know. But for real though, Nina Hill is one of the most relatable characters of all time for me. Like she even talks about how she has a separate bookshelf just for her book of the month selection books, and I'm like, what? Like she's literally me to the point where it's like uncomfortable. But yeah, this book was super cute. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Third book that I read this month was Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman, and this book is actually a sequel to the book Scythe. And I actually did a full book talk on this book and Scythe earlier this month, so I will put a link in the description if you want to check that out. But basically this is a young adult dystopian sci-fi fantasy series that I can't believe I am in love with. I feel like Thunderhead was just as strong of a book as Scythe was, and I think the series is just so great, so good. If you don't know what the series Scythe is about, it basically takes place in a very, very, very far future where humans have conquered death and humans are living immortally. Because of that, we've run into the issue of overpopulation. So there are these people called scythes who go out and randomly kill people as a sort of natural selection to prevent the world from becoming too overpopulated. And Scythe, like the book Scythe really follows, you know, the characters that are scythes, and we get to see like how they like live morally and how they, you know, go about their lives. But then in Thunderhead, it's a lot more about like the world and like, oh my god, this book is so fascinating. Like, and I found Thunderhead to be a lot more thought-provoking than Scythe was, because this one really just goes into like so many different moral dilemmas and things, and oh my god, it was so good. This was another 5 out of 5 star book for me. It was incredible. It was so good, and I can't wait to read the 3rd book that's coming out in November. It's so weird to say that, you know, because like I'm really not a series reader, but like, wow, Scythe is incredible. Alright, the 4th book that I read this month is The Life of the Party by Olivia Gatwood. This was sent to me by Penguin Random House. This is a collection of poetry that's about feminism, but also violence against women specifically, and it's also about crime, like true crime and violence against women. It's a lot of mix of those things. Honestly, for me, this poetry collection was okay. Like, it mostly didn't really work for me, which is sad to say because I really wanted to love this. But I feel like with poetry, you know, poetry is very subjective, and I feel like I find a lot of poetry that does work for me and a lot of poetry that doesn't really work for me, and this is just one that I didn't really connect with. The poems don't even really feel like poems, they just feel like streams of consciousness that are just like stories, and I don't know, and it was a very weird mix of like, some of it would just be like chunks and chunks and chunks of like words, and then like the next page would be like very like nothing, you know, like it was just a very like wide variety of types of poems, and I just like, I liked a few of them, but I didn't really connect with most of them. So I ended up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars because I did find it enjoyable and I appreciate the subject matter that's covered in this book, but at the same time, like, it's not something that I would really recommend, and it's not something that's gonna stay on my mind for very long. The 5th book I read this month was my Reread Autobiography. I actually got my hands on the audiobook for this one too, and I was able to listen to the audiobook for this, and this was my reread of the month. Like, this is one of my favorite books of all time, and this is a young adult contemporary novel that's a male-male romance between these 2 teenage boys. It takes place in Utah. Our main character, Tanner, is bisexual, and then he starts to fall for the bishop's son, Sebastian. Heartbreaking, but it's also so beautiful because I just love both of their characters so much, and I love the fact that this book is described as like Fangirl meets Simon versus Homo sapiens agenda, because in this book, their writers, like, he's taking this class in his senior year of high school that's, you write an entire book within that class, and Sebastian is the TA in that class, and it's just so cute. Like, oh my god. I just love this book so much, and I gave it another 5 out of 5 stars this time. It's one of the best. It's so freaking good. Right, the 6th book that I read this month was All the Ugly and Wonderful Things by Bryn Greenwood. And I just wanted to say thank you to anybody that recommended this book to me, because after Romanceathon, I was getting a lot of people recommending this book to me because they were saying that because it features a very taboo, forbidden relationship, they thought that I would really enjoy it. I really enjoyed this book, but I will say that it's not gonna be for everyone, because this book deals with a very, very controversial relationship. And if you don't know anything about what this book is about, it follows this relationship between this man that's in his 20s and this very, very young girl that the romance doesn't begin until she's about 13, but in the beginning of this book, she's 10. So I know that that's like the most cringiest thing you've probably ever heard, and like, it's easy to deem him as like a pedophile and just make quick judgments about people, you know? But wow, this book was heavy as shit. This story really just like weighed on my heart, and these characters, Kellen and Wavy, just really got to me emotionally and just made me think and question my own morals. And honestly, like, I love a book that can make me question my own morals and be like, am I rooting for them? Am I not rooting for them? Like, I just feel so many things, and I genuinely just felt so sad while I read this book, because both of these characters are really victims of their life situation. They both experienced so much tragedy, and like, I couldn't help but feel so bad for them, and it almost like it just really made me sympathize with their situation, you know, and this book is just so heavy and it's so beautiful, and I can definitely tell you, like, this book is not going to be for everyone. Like, there are definitely going to be some people out there that are way too uncomfortable by this subject, and like, I definitely was very uncomfortable reading some of these scenes and like reading parts of this book, but at the same time, like, it just made me feel so much sympathy towards a situation that I never thought I could feel sympathy for, and I think that that's very powerful when a book can make you do that, you know? So I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really good, and the end of this book, like, as soon as I finished it, that last line, I actually like set the book aside and was just like staring into space for like 10 minutes, and then I just cried, and it's so sad and it's so beautiful. This book kind of actually reminds me of Forbidden by Tabitha Suzuma. It has that same, like, you don't know if you should be rooting for the couple or not, but you're just heartbroken. It has that same exact vibe, so I think if you like that book, you would probably definitely like this too. The 7th book I read this month is Someone We Know by Sherry Lapina. This one is her latest adult thriller, and I really like Sherry Lapina as a thriller author. She's usually one of my favorites. However, this book didn't really do it for me. I mean, this book ended up being around like a 3 out of 5 stars, but it still was just kind of like missing something to make it great. This book takes place within this neighborhood, and we get to follow many of the different characters in the neighborhood and find out things about them. The story begins with this anonymous person killing this girl, and then she gets reported missing. In another chapter, we get to find out that this boy, this teenage boy, has been sneaking into people's houses and hacking into their computers. And then somehow within this neighborhood, those stories are related somehow, and so we're like finding out how these two are connected. And this story was really interesting. Like, it kept me hooked for most of the story, but then I got so bored and irritated by the repetitiveness of what kept happening. And then we started to also follow from the point of view of one of the detectives, and I started to get really bored because, like, if you don't know, I'm not a huge fan of detective thrillers for some reason, so anytime there's a detective point of view, my eyes just like glaze over. So this one was okay. I mean, I wanted to love it, but I didn't, and this is definitely my least favorite from Sherry Lapina so far, so it was kind of disappointing. 8th book that I read this month, however, was not disappointing, and that was The Passengers by John Mars. And this is an arc that I received from Berkeley. This one just went on sale August 27th. This one is an adult thriller that's also kind of like sci-fi because it takes place in the future, and in this future we have driverless cars. And so these cars can drive themselves. This premise is one of the most interesting book premises I've ever heard, by the way. I just want to throw that out there. But it says, you're riding in your self-driving car when suddenly the doors lock, the route changes, and you have lost all control. Then a mysterious voice tells you you are going to die. We follow from the point of view of 8 different people who are trapped in their cars thinking they're about to die, and they are getting streamed live to the public, like the video from inside of each of their cars. This hacker that's controlling this whole situation is threatening to expose the secrets of the lives of the people that are trapped in these cars, and then threatening to also kill them. And it's just crazy. Honestly, this book gave me such Black Mirror vibes, like, for real. This book was probably inspired by Black Mirror, and I feel like it should become an episode of Black Mirror because what the fuck? It's written so well. There are so many plot twists. I was constantly blown away too by this world. Like, there are so many cool sci-fi things that get thrown into this book that you're just like, whoa. The author of this book is so amazing in the way that he can make you think one thing about a character, and then you get completely proven wrong, like, later in the story. And I think it's so cool what he has to say about our first assumptions about people and how everything is not always what it seems. I ended up giving this one 4.5 out of 5 stars, and the only reason why I didn't get a solid 5 from me is because I feel like towards the end it started to lose its momentum a little bit. Like, I started to get a tad bored with it, or just like wanting to get to the end of it. And also because I never really connected with the main character, I think, in the way that the author intended for me to. But other than that, it didn't really affect my enjoyment of the story all that much, because this book was entertaining as hell. Like, seriously, if you're looking for like a fast-paced thriller that will keep you reading all night, This is the one right here. Oh my god, so good. All right, the 9th book I read this month was When August Ends by Penelope Ward. And this one is the only romance novel, technically, that I read all month long. I decided to read it this month because it's August and because this is one that I wanted to read like for a while now. I've wanted to read it since the romanceathon that happened in June, and I just wanted to read it because I heard it also features a very forbidden relationship. And it does, because in this book, the guy is 34 and she is 20. So, I mean, there's a good 14-year age gap there, but like, this book was just mediocre at best. Like, it was just not very interesting, and the girl in this book drove me fucking nuts with her, like, immaturity. And, like, I don't know, like, the main story happening in this book is that her, like, the girl, her sister recently killed herself, and her mom's, like, been in a very bad depression ever since, and she lives on this lake with her mom, and then this guy rents out the boathouse, whatever, at their lake, so then he's gonna be living on the lake with them for the summer. This book just ended up being just okay. Like, I just wanted so much more from it, you know? I ended up giving it 2 stars. It just wasn't really my jam. It just didn't really do it for me. After this book, I really started to hit a rut with my reading this month, and I got very, very discouraged because next I started to pick up Well Met. I read 59 pages of this before I decided to set it down because I realized I don't really care about Renaissance fairs, and I don't really like reading about Renaissance fairs, and I was just not in the mood for this at all. And then I picked up City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert because this one's been on my TBR for like ever, and I read 53 pages of this book before I realized I'm just really not in the mood for historical fiction right now. Like, it was putting me to sleep. So then I picked up Wilder Girls, which was the 10th book that I read this month. Disclaimer, I also DNF'd this book at 200 pages, but because I got 200 pages into this book, I'm still including it for my book count this month because I read 200 pages of it. This book was interesting, it just wasn't for me. You know, like, sometimes you read a book and you're like, I can see why other people would like that, but it's just not really for me. Like, it's not really my thing. This book is a young adult, queer, horror, sci-fi kind of dystopian novel that follows these girls that are quarantined on this island. They have like freaky things happening to their bodies, like their bodies are breaking out into all this weird stuff, like they got a second spine and shit, flowers and shit growing out of their faces and their eyes, and it's some wild stuff, you know? This book, it was good, okay? It was good, kind of. It had like a weird vibe to it. Some very interesting writing. Like, the writing was hard to get into at first, but I could also appreciate the writing because it was beautiful, but it was like hard to get into. As much as I liked these characters, I still feel like I never could connect with them. Like, they were just so like flat to me for some reason. Definitely gave me like Annihilation vibes. Like, if you've ever seen that movie, like Annihilation, it really gave me those like eerie kind of weird Annihilation vibes, which I liked. But like, this book just could not hold my attention, and I don't know if that's just a me thing right now or if it's the book thing. So I ended up DNFing this one, and I ended up giving it 2 out of 5 stars. And it's crazy because like, I want to give this book like around 3 out of 5 stars because I'm like, I can appreciate it and I can see why people would enjoy it, but at the same time I'm like, I DNF'd it. Like, I didn't even want to finish it. What does that say about the book? Or what does it say about me? I don't know. I'm just in a weird mood right now. And then the last book that I read this month was The Whisper Man, which is also one of my book of the month selections for this month, but this was also a DNF after 200 pages. So the end of the month has not been going well. I'm kind of in a slump, I think. But this book is about this creepy ass whisper man who's basically like a serial killer kind of that makes these little boys disappear. Oh my god, dude, I had such high hopes for this book. I thought it was gonna be like the Chalk Man or something. I'm so torn though over how I feel about this book because I feel like half of this book is really interesting. Like, I like the story between the father and the son, but then the other half of this book is told from the point of view of a detective. So it's like, I just can't get into it. Like, it's just so slow. And like, there's a couple good like creepy parts, but they're so far and few in between that I just like am losing interest so fast. So I did DNF this book after about 200 pages for this one too, and I ended up giving it 2 stars. Which sucks because I had really high hopes for this one, you know? I just hate when I DNF this many books in a row. I mean, like, these 2 technically weren't DNF'd, I just set them aside after 50 pages. Like, I might still give these another shot soon. Oh my god, I hate being in a reading slump. It sucks. Lately, I've just been in this mood where I'm like, I don't want to freaking read. And August was like such a weird month for me. Like, I know I read a lot of 5-star books, which was great. Like, those were definitely the peaks for me this month. But like, like towards the end of this month, I have just not been in a reading mood at all. Like, all I've been wanting to do is just lay down and watch movies. I might make a video too soon about DNFing books, because, you know, I get a lot of comments from time to time with people being like, you can't count a book as finished if you DNF'd it, or like, you can't count it towards your books for that month and whatever. I slightly agree with you, but at the same time, like, if I read more than 50% of the book, then like, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna count it towards my goal for the year. I don't know, like, so I kind of want to like have a video just discussing like DNFing books and whether or not you count those towards your books read and whatever, because I think it is an interesting topic to talk about, and just because I want to like save like my full opinion on it in a separate video. So if that's something you'd be interested in, then I guess you can let me know, and that'll probably be coming sometime soon. But yeah, those are all the books that I read in August. I feel like I'm a cell phone with low battery right now because I'm so tired. Please let me know what your thoughts are on any of these books that I mentioned, and if you see any of your favorites in this video. How many books did you read in August? What was your favorite book that you read this month and your least favorite book that you read this month? I actually read a pretty decent amount of like great stuff this month. The Turn of the Key is still my favorite thing that I read this month. I also had these other 5-star reads that were freaking great, and The Passengers is probably gonna be one of my favorites of the year. Like, not gonna lie, it's just so great. I'm gonna go lay down, and I will see you guys very soon with a new video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Books, 3-star books and 3 2-star books. I had four. I can't read.